All right, well, looking at the Tang and Song dynasties, we also want to take a minute to look at the significance of the Tang dynasty and the fact that it was the one and only dynasty in Chinese history to have a female empress, and that's the Empress Wu. So let's take a quick look at her. First of all, we want to consider the role of women. Confucius's beliefs basically said that having a woman rule would be as unnatural as having a, quote, hen crow like a rooster at daybreak, unquote. So again, the traditional role in Confucian society was that women would not be in charge. Remember, in our study of Confucianism, the only role of a woman was that to be wife. There was no other role for a woman in the five social relationships. All right, so the Empress Wu Zetian, that's her full name, basically comes from Tang Dynasty. As Tang Dynasty Empress from 625 to 705. Now, she was the only female in Chinese history to rule as empress. To some, she was oppressive, ruthless, and power hungry. And to others, she was a woman doing a man's job, and she acted no differently than most male emperors. So again, from the perspective of history, we have to ask who might be writing this account. If you're saying that she's a ruthless woman, it's probably Confucian men or Confucian scholars who particularly didn't favor her, and as a result, they might be writing negative things about her. But if people admired what she did, then they're probably going to say that she did a very good job. These might be people who would have been of Buddhist nature because Buddhism was a new religion that had come to China that she had promoted. Now, then and now, ruthless woman or intelligent woman. We have these same dilemmas in our own society. So again, we have the Empress Wu. Again, some people might say she was a ruthless woman. Some people might use the same categorization when talking about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, wife of a former president, also a New York State senator herself, and now she's the Secretary of State. In both cases, you can sort of compare them. It's not a perfect comparison, but some people really do not like Hillary Clinton. I suspect that some people did not like the Empress Wu. And the question is, why would people not like women in power? In Confucian society, at the very least, we know it's that Confucianism put men in a position of seeing women as nothing more than wives. In our own society today, some people think the role of a woman is to be a wife, to stay home, raise the children, be a good wife to her husband. Other people think that they need to be independent, well educated, and basically work for the benefit of themselves. So those sort of issues are still persistent, not just in the Tang Dynasty, but even in the world in which we live today. Okay, so it depends on who writes history. In China, Confucian men wrote history, so there's a lot of bad things that are said about the Empress Wu after she passes from being the empress. In the United States of America, it will depend on who writes history. If men who didn't like Hillary Clinton end up writing the history, there'll be a negative view of her. I suspect if a woman who sees her as an intelligent, independent woman writes history, then we may get a very different view of the role of Hillary Clinton in history. Okay, so the Empress Wu ruled China during its most peaceful and culturally diverse periods. That's important that you understand that. This is, regardless of what Confucian scholars may have said about the Empress Wu, there's no doubt that during her reign, a lot of the great accomplishments of the Tang Dynasty can be attributed. Now, the Chen tomb. This is the tomb that the Empress Wu had built for her death. She would have been buried actually inside this mountain where the tomb would have been located, and this would have been a causeway that would have led to her tomb. It's a very unique tomb. This is what it looked like in the 1980s when I first traveled to it, and as you can see, it's a very unique tomb. And here's an image that gives you an idea of what that tomb would have looked like at the time it would have been constructed. So it doesn't quite look like that today, but it would have been a very impressive tomb, and it would have stood out from most other emperors' tombs at that time because of its design and its location. So, what did the Empress Wu do for China at this time period? Well, she required that poetry became a requirement on the Confucian exams. In fact, she made every official and scholar a poet by adding that to the exam system. So up in this time, if you wanted to be a member of the bureaucracy and work for government, you had to pass the Confucian exam system. And what she did was alter that system by adding poetry to that process. And again, as we've seen earlier with the great poets Li Bai and Du Fu, this would become a major component of Chinese life. And what's interesting is that even after the passing of the Empress Wu, poetry still became associated with being a Confucian scholar or an educated elite. So again, she changed the perspective of China in many ways. And again, here's the capital of Chang'an. Again, today we call that Xi'an. And I just want you to take a good look at this map. It's a pretty good representation of what the city might have looked like at that time. And it was famous for its grid-like pattern, not because it's efficient, because it actually controls the movement of people. Grid patterns make it a little bit difficult for you to go where you actually want to go. You can't take any shortcuts. And what it does is it slows populations down, and it keeps it easy to keep tabs on where people might be. And again, people living within the city would have been people associated with the royal family, working for the government. You can see there are two markets on both sides of the city, but this would have been a very prosperous place to live. And this is the city where most people would have come to during the Great Trade along the Silk Road that also helped to bring an era of prosperity under the Empress Wu in the Tang Dynasty.